This is your Wednesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Good show coming up today. I'll talk to Drew Magary from Defector Media here in just a little bit. Drew does the very popular series on every single NFL team. Got to the Vikings last week, and I talked to him about that. He's a Vikings fan, his expectations, what he was optimistic about. Drew's not just pessimistic, he's optimistic too, but also what concerns him about this year's team. Great conversation with him. I'll have that in just a little bit. I have a nugget about an NBA player suing his agent for bad contract advice, and we'll talk Twins here in a minute too. Maybe little dose of reality for them out east. But first, what did I miss? An ode to Sylvia Fowles. Lynx center, 35 years old, had an amazing game, an unprecedented game. Sometimes we throw around the word, unique or, never been, we say, that's never been done before. Well, she legitimately had a game against Seattle that has never been done in WNBA history. Kent Youngblood writing about this game in the Star Tribune, startribune.com. Lynx beat Seattle, by the way, 76-70. That's more than an oh, by the way, because that was the first time they've beaten them in 11 tries. Seattle, one of the best teams in the league. And Fowles was a huge reason, like the number 1A, number 1B, number 1C reason. She had 29 points, 20 rebounds. She just went off. I believe she had 4 blocks, 3 steals. First time in WNBA history that someone has ever had a game with 20 points, 20 rebounds, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. Just, unbelievable game. I had that backwards, by the way. 4 steals, 3 blocks. Either way, amazing for Fowles. No fouls for Fowles. No turnovers in the game. Had a key block down the stretch to help the Lynx seal that win. And, I guess the bigger point is I don't know how much, if we appreciate her enough. And that was the point that Cheryl Reeve was trying to make after the game as well. I'm going to play a clip of her in just a moment here, kind of talking about her place in the league. Maybe we can talk about her place in the marketplace. Whenever we talk about the greatest players who are actively playing in Minnesota sports right now, I feel like we gloss over Sylvia Fowles for whatever reason it is. Maybe it's because she's getting older. We tend to be fascinated more with the younger players, the new talent. We know what Fowles can do to a certain degree, but she just keeps doing it. Maybe we're expecting her to fall off at a certain point because she is an older player. We don't have those expectations sometimes as players get older. The same kind of disrespect is maybe happening to LeBron James right now, not getting any votes as the best player in the league when clearly he probably still is when he's healthy. I mean, just let's be honest. So here's Reeve anyway, kind of talking about how the WNBA maybe doesn't even respect what Fowles has done and doesn't market her in the way that it should.
I think who misses out is fans. I think our league has grossly underserved Sylvia Fowles' career. We hear about so many other players, and I'm sure ESPN went into this game wanting to love up on, all the stars from Seattle. Sylvia Fowles is the most underserved player in the league. You never see the league pushing Sylvia Fowles. When's the last time Sylvia Fowles got a player of the week? One of the best player. I told you, so one of the best players ever, certainly at the center spot. I mean, so I just don't think there's anybody close in terms of what she does for her team.
For Fowles' part, I mean, she came here in 2015, really keyed kind of the back half of that Lynx dynasty with, when they got 2 more championships while she was here. She's been an MVP. She's done, tons of great stuff in the playoffs. But she was asked, I believe by Kent Youngblood, like, where does this game kind of rank in how does she kind of soak up this memory and kind of put it into context? I thought her answer was interesting, and so I'm going to share that with you now as well.
I don't know just yet, but I do know that I will start giving myself more credit. I'm the type of player who don't really try to think about it because I think this is my job and these are things that I'm supposed to be doing. But at the end of the day, these things are not easy. And so just enjoying the ride and making sure I understand the work that I put in and making sure I know that this is not easy. But I got some time to let it sink in tonight. So I'll give you a question later. I'll give you an answer later in the week.
I do hope she got to enjoy this one, and I do hope that we recognize her place. She's a GOAT. She's one of the greatest of all time. She just is. Whether you're saying that's in the WNBA, whether you're saying that's in Minnesota sports, either one of those is true. She is a dominant, great player. Maybe doesn't play the style that is played as much today because she's more of a traditional kind of back to the basket, tall center who, does those tall center things. But you know what? Those tall center things are still very valuable, and Sylvia Fowles does them as well as anyone. Not the greatest of all time, on the other hand, the Twins. I had Phil Miller on, I think, last week, and we talked about how they were on a little bit of a roll. They'd beaten some good teams lately. I think they had an 8-3 stretch where they were winning a lot of series. And I was like, Phil, is this a reason for optimism? Should we kind of get excited about, not that they're going to have this magical run and go, try to get in the wild card race or something ridiculous like that, but, should this give you optimism going into next year? And he was like, it's nice that they're playing better, but, every season is going to have a stretch like this because the season is so long. You're going to get some breaks along the way. You're going to win some games. Don't get too excited. Phil was right. Twins have now lost 4 in a row to the Yankees and now the Red Sox, 11-9 on Tuesday night. Twins rallied, and I turned the game on. I looked at the score. It was 3-1 Twins. I was like, okay. I caught up to it a little while later. They were down 4-3. By the time that inning was over and Griffin Jacks was done, it was 9-3. And then I turned it off. I didn't see much of the rally. So I guess, good moral victory. Put that one in the moral victory standings, but still another loss for the Twins on this road trip. And everything that's gone wrong has been exposed. You had Jorge Polanco at short, by the way. Nick Gordon at second base. I don't know what the Andrelton Simmons experience is over. Love to see Jose Miranda up here sooner rather than later, so hope they can figure out how to get all those guys on the field, because in a lost season, the only real thing I care about now is what about 2022 and who can help. Unfortunately, Griffin Jacks didn't fit that bill, got rocked pretty good in that game on the mound. But, we'll see. Let's see who can help over these last 5-6 weeks. I know rosters don't expand to the same degree. I know the Saints season goes as long as the MLB season does, but I want to see what some of these guys can do against Major League competition, and now is the time to find out.
I'm Chris Hine, Timberwolves beat writer at the Star Tribune and the first 5-time guest in daily delivery history. Thank you for listening to this podcast. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast, our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, and even all of Rand's future blog posts about how the Timberwolves should trade for players they will never get, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Really happy to have back on the podcast. He was one of the first daily delivery guests, and saving him up for a special occasion again, Drew Magary. Formerly Deadspin, still a lot of other places, most prominently now Defector Media, where he has continued to do his very popular series on season preview for every single NFL team. Got to his Vikings, your Vikings last week. Pointed out some things that might not be great about this year's team, some things that maybe we could be optimistic about, and I think we're going to get to both of those on today's show. Drew, how you doing, man?
I don't recall saying anything nice about the Vikings.
You said Irv Smith would be a top 5 tight end.
I did. I love Irv Smith. Love him. Fantastic play.
So as kind of a countermeasure, so after that came out, I texted you and I said, hey, come on the podcast again, please. You said, yes, appreciate that. But we kind of had him back and forth where you were like, I don't want to be pessimistic. I at this point in the season, you want to have a certain amount of optimism about this year's team, because it's no fun to go into a year if you're just going to be, if you don't want to dread a football season, even if there's practical reasons to be skeptical. So let's start with what might work this year. And for me, like the number one thing is the defense could be pretty good.
I think the defense could be very good. And that means that if the offense is as good as it was last year, and really, even though the preseason has been awful, there's not much reason to believe that it won't. If it's any worse than it was last year, I don't think it would be significantly worse. But then you would have, it was the number 4 offense overall in football last year. And if you combine that with a defense that has the talent on paper, at least, to be in the top half of the league, then it's a playoff team, right? But there are Vikings elements to it that, counteract a lot of all of that. Also, the other thing is that when it comes to pessimism with the Vikings, I'm very selfish about it. When my friends who are Vikings fans call Kirk like Kurt, and they're like, "Oh well, we suck and we're gonna go 6-10," I get pissed internally, and I have no good explanation for that at all.
So it's your own. You and you alone get to have this.
Right, I want to hog it all to myself, and really, even then, because I'd rather spend. I don't like spending games being like they're gonna blow it, because then I'm not really enjoying myself. I may as well just spend most of my time believing they can win, because then at least 5/6 of the game is pleasant to me before it all falls apart at the end.
And I like what you said, offensively and defensively, and this was kind of the second point, like skill position wise, and even if they throw Brian O'Neill into that mix,
sure,
like their 12 to 15 best players are probably like in the top 5 or 10 of like the whole league. If you just compare like the top half of the roster, would you agree with that? Like they have a very top heavy roster. Like if you just said these are their 15 best players, you're like, that's a pretty good team.
Yeah. I mean, they have at least 7 guys. I mean, hang on. I would say 6 or 7 guys who are eligible in any given year to be all pro caliber, right? Kendricks, Smith, Hunter, Jefferson, Thielen, Cook. And, I don't think I'm going to throw Brian O'Neill in there or Urban there just yet, but already that is deeper than, a lot of teams in the bottom half of the league.
Yeah. So
I shouldn't say deeper, but more talented. They're not a deep team by any means.
And for that reason, and we'll get to this soon, it feels like we texted about this the other day. It feels like the variance on this team and why we're going to spend some time talking about optimism and pessimism is I feel like they could win 12 games. They could go 12-5, and I wouldn't be like, "Oh, I never saw that coming." Like I feel like that's kind of a pretty optimistic endpoint for this season. But if you look at it and say, "Yeah, most things went right. The offense was as good as you thought it was going to be. The defense held together, and all these veterans kind of came together, and the kicking game held up well enough." You could see a 12-5 season, but you could also see a 5-12 season or a 6-11 season. Not that you want to start there, but that wide range, it feels like a wider range than I'm used to with this team, especially with Cousins as quarterback.
Right, because last year they went all out. They thought, they traded for Ngakoue. They thought they were going to be a playoff team, and then everyone got hurt. And that could easily happen again this year. And if it does happen again, they're just as really ill-equipped for contingency plans as last year's team was in a lot of ways. Superficially, they're better. But, if like Patrick Peterson and Bashaud Breeland get hurt, they're screwed, right? So you're right. The variance is all over the place. And I think about 2017 because that team was probably the healthiest Vikings team of my lifetime. And also, I've noticed that any year where they do the thing where they go to the NFC title game and then they lose the NFC title game, they're usually pegged like an 8-8 or 9-7 team. They're not like overwhelmingly favored to go to the NFC title game the years that they've gone. And then they do. So any year where they're not really all that heralded, and I don't think they're particularly heralded this year, then I'm like, okay, there's a chance they could surprise people and do all right. I will say, though, that the schedule is murder. It's just a brutal, brutal schedule. And they went 7-9 against a nothing schedule last year. So you have to account for that, too.
Yeah, some of how you feel about them does depend on how you feel about their opponents, the rest of their division. I kind of wish they were getting Andy Dalton's Bears, not what's likely to be Justin Fields' Bears, because both those games are, I think, towards the end of the season against the Bears.
Right, Fields will stab them in the face. Like Fields will be good against them.
He's going to be good. And Aaron Rodgers, we had this fantasy all summer, like he was going to get traded or go retire and host Jeopardy, and that never happened.
That was never going to happen. I do still cling to last year's victory in Lambeau. I thought that was there was something about that victory that was very encouraging to me because they shut out Green Bay and for most of the second half till the very end, the Packers got a garbage time touchdown. And so that was when I was feeling good about guys like Cam Dantzler and things like that. And of course, Dantzler may not even make the final roster this fall. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a real indictment of some of the picks they've had and really the whole defensive plan last year. And maybe that's our pivot point to one more thing that could be a positive or could be a negative this year. It feels like this is a team that's going to play with a certain amount of urgency. Like everybody, every key stakeholder on this team is either wanting a new contract or coaching for their job, or Rick Spielman, certainly, not a sure thing that he'll keep his job. Like, it feels like there's a lot of decisions that have been made that basically say this year or no more.
Right, because every free agent they signed was essentially a one-year deal. There's a few exceptions like Tomlinson, but everybody else is a one-year deal. So everybody on that defense is playing for a fat contract next season. And then you have the Kirk situation where I think everybody knows that the team is essentially done with Kirk, barring him doing something utterly spectacular. And so the pressure is on him. He has to win 13 games if they're going to be at all inclined to keep him around, knowing all the baggage that he brings every year.
But he also has a $45 million guaranteed contract for 2022, which that brings me to the downside here. So you in your piece, in your season preview, you write Kirk is a millstone, a joke, and a self-own all in one. The day he leaves this team will be my Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and it's a great line. It's good. It's good writing. The piece was great as always. But how realistic? Like, even if he has a bad year, like what are you gonna? You don't cut $45 million in guaranteed money, do you?
Sure, why not? I mean, I just saw Carson Wentz get traded with the worst contract in football, and so I don't really care about the cap. I think that it's past the point of no return with Kirk, particularly because he won't get vaccinated. I think it bore out that he is not the team player that he's always purported himself and self-brand himself to be. And I don't think his teammates care about him at all. I know they don't. Like, I know Jefferson can't stand them. I know Diggs couldn't stand them. I know Everson Griffin has said the nice things yesterday, like,
right.
Oh, I'm going to say sorry for my tweets and all that, because they need a job, right? He doesn't like Kirk. None of them like Kirk. And you can't have a team despise its quarterback that openly and succeed. No matter how good the quarterback is, it's not going to happen.
So that's a problem, because as we've seen in 2 preseason games, and again, it's just preseason, and Kellen Mond missed 10 days of camp because he had COVID. Maybe he gets better, but Kellen Mond and Jake Browning are not coming in and saving this season. They both look shaky, and maybe they're scouring the waiver wire on cut down days, and they're going to add a different backup. Who knows? There's cap considerations for that, but this is a tenuous quarterback situation given everything we know at this point.
Yeah, Browning's a scrub. I mean, in some ways, I don't even think Browning will make the final roster.
I don't think so either.
But I think what could happen is that they don't sign a veteran backup, because I think it's slim pickings. Like, who do you even sign? Right? Like Babe Laufenberg? I don't even know who's out there right now.
Like CJ Beathard could be available if Jackson.
Yeah, all right. Some scrub like CJ Beathard, but you're going to win 4 or 5 games with CJ Beathard as your quarterback. But in some ways, fine. Like, then you may as well get to the garbage process part of operations quicker. You may as well get to it this year instead of next year, because I don't, there's no point to me. And, and I say this I'm being a bit disingenuous when I say this, but it's not really all that worth it to me to have a 9-8 season this season, just behind, I don't know, an Andy Dalton to be named later because Kirk got hurt, and then just middling your way through 2022 to get to the point where we all want to be right now anyway. So I don't, the reason I was excited when Mon was drafted was because it was a clear signal that the Vikings were saying, okay, we understand. We cannot be all in on Kirk forever. Not even in the short term. And it was that recognition I required as a fan. We know that they knew what they were doing, but they saw what we were seeing.
Do you think they're actively agitating Kirk Cousins now by, obviously Zimmer's been very frontal, and I think he's having every right to be frontal about the vaccines, getting these guys vaccinated. They brought Osterholm in on Monday to practice to lecture these guys again about get vaccinated, you idiots. And then they signed Everson Griffin, like you referenced, who tweeted about Kirk 8 months ago. Is this just Zimmer's like, I don't care anymore? Or how do you interpret this? Is this just coincidence, or do you think this is targeted?
I don't think Zimmer didn't care much for Case Keenum, even while he was taking the NFC Championship.
That's true. He kept saying Case was lucky, essentially.
Yeah, Zimmer's. That's always been Zimmer's MO, right? And so I don't. If they, as an organization, have gone from coddling Kirk to having essentially higher expectations for him and not being terribly patient with him, I think that can only be good, because coddling him has only gotten us this far. And we've got one really nice playoff win against New Orleans to show for it. And we got absolutely mollywopped the week later. So and you may as well treat him like dirt and give him some motivation, even if it's negative reinforcement. I'm fine with that.
That said, Zimmer seems tense. I don't know if tense Zimmer is good Zimmer. We've seen that over the years where when he gets a little bit, decisions get made. They cut the kicker after 2 weeks. Weird things happen when he gets a little tense.
Yeah, he's not level-headed enough, I think, because he's still that Parcells school of, the more caustic I am, the more effective I'll be. And that just doesn't work in today's NFL anymore. But I don't, in contrast, I've also seen a lot of preseason stuff, and it's preseason stuff, so it's all probably a lie, where it's like, oh, he's a little softer. He listens a bit more. He's changing the scheme. Do I buy any of that? No, but that's also out there where, the fact alone that he has been the human face of the Vikings, well, they have badly on the pandemic, tells me more about him than in a post-game presser after a preseason game.
I thought that Michael Pierce with his calf was going to be the kind of surprise lingering injury, and then I thought maybe it was Justin Jefferson, but it seems like he's kind of making his way back. Surprise, I think it's Anthony Barr. Still don't know when he's going to be available. Sounds like they're being careful, but they were careful with Daniil Hunter until he was out for the year. How worried are you about Anthony Barr?
Not terribly. It's Darrisaw. I think Darrisaw's the one. Well, then not
that one too.
Not playing at all. I think if Barr got hurt, frankly, I value Kendricks more than I value Barr.
Sure.
So I'm not that concerned about it. But yeah, I mean, I'll always have PTSD from the way they handled Hunter a year ago, because they were very vague about it. And then suddenly the bottom fell out from underneath them. So, that was handled just incredibly, incredibly poorly. And there doesn't seem to be much indication, even though Zimmer has said otherwise, there doesn't seem to be much indication to me that they've learned from that debacle much.
No. Speaking of not learning from debacles, a couple more things. Drew Magary, kicking game and the offensive line. I mean, these have been like downfalls of this team. These have like ruined or contributed to the ruination of multiple Mike Zimmer seasons. 2016, like that was a good team. That team started 5-0, and they couldn't protect. Like Sam Bradford had to throw every pass like 2.2 feet because they could not keep him upright. Blair Walsh couldn't make a field goal. Like every year that's been ruined, it feels like, okay, they're going to learn. And yeah, they brought in Dan Bailey. That was supposed to stabilize things. That didn't work. They've drafted a bunch of offensive linemen. Yeah, but they're either hurt or they're not any good. Like, which one of those is most likely to ruin this season? Or do you think it's going to be okay and we should just stop worrying about those things?
No, I mean, I think the pattern is made clear enough now that it's a coaching problem and not, I mean, you can also attribute it to, player acquisition and development. But Dan Bailey was, one of the best statistical kickers in history before he came here. That's coaching. So we don't have the same special teams coach that we had a year ago. And our offensive line coaching situation is,
didn't even get into that.
Hysterical. And, presiding over it all is still Zimmer. So, it does not give me a great amount of confidence, even though I think personnel wise, I'm happier with the O-line this year than I was last year, but I'll only have that happiness, sort of consecrated when Dakota Dozier gets cut.
It almost seems like so many things have happened that we forget. Like we overlook some of the key storylines that, oh yeah, their offensive line coach is brand new now midstream. And oh yeah, their offensive coordinator is also very new to calling plays and is brand new to all this, even if it's a similar scheme. It's almost like so many things have been thrown at us storyline wise already that it's hard to keep them straight. It's like it's from a political strategist playbook to just keep us guessing at what's coming next.
Well, you're also like, the offensive coordinator is a fail-some, right? It's Gary Kubiak's kid. And last year, Zimmer appointed his own kid to be co-defensive coordinator when really Andre Patterson had more than earned that job. And what happens? I didn't see Adam Zimmer get held accountable at all for what happened last year to that defense. And I know that Mike is the shadow defensive coordinator of this team, or not even shadow. It's open and public to all. But, we're being coordinated by fail sons on both sides of the ball. And that is not encouraging to me. I don't care for that.
Last thing, a lot of old familiar guys on the team. I think Everson Griffin makes 4 ex-Vikings, now current Vikings on the defense. Him, Mackenzie Alexander, Weatherly, and Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah.
Get the band back together. It's just Zimmer just loves himself some guys that he knows what they do, has seen them do it. I don't care if it was 6 or 7 years ago. It's just kind of amusing to me. Like we've seen Zimmer now for 8 years, and it's such a clear playbook on his end. He wants to win every game 2-0, and he doesn't care he doesn't want the expensive quarterback. He just wants his guys, and he wants to win his way. He'd love to hold the ball for 35 minutes and have the defense get all the glory. And that's kind of what this year is going to boil down to, I think, unless the offense can block anybody.
I mean, it's why they brought Griffin back, because, again, just like Parcells, Zimmer has guys, you know. So it's like there's a small negligence or a small obliviousness toward talent, as long as you're someone that Zimmer knows he likes and knows how to work with and feels comfortable with, and that can come at the expense of roster depth and talent, and that's not good.
Well, we'll see how it goes. The all-important 3rd preseason game coming up, then the real thing, a little over 2 weeks from now in Cincinnati. 9 road games, just eight home games, 9 road games, another little piece of the puzzle this year as well. Drew, anything coming up that you want to plug?
The Night the Lights Went Out. My book comes out October 5th. Buy it.
You should do that. I'm going to do that as well. Drew, we'll talk again soon. Be well, man.
Thanks, Rand. See ya.
Always love catching up with Drew, even if it means a longer edit to clean up some of his stream of consciousness swearing. It sounds even funnier when you're just listening to him straight through, but the edit with Drew can be tricky. And one thing I will add to the Anthony Barr thing that he and I talked about seems like it's getting a little bit dicier. Adam Zimmer saying not sure if Barr is going to be ready for the opener. Still this undisclosed injury. So again, we'll be tracking that. An undisclosed injury for the Vikings to a key defensive player just sets off all sorts of alarm bells. So we'll see where that takes us for the rest of this preseason and into that September 12th opener at Cincinnati. Nerlens Noel, let's end with the cooler, suing his former agent, Rich Paul, because he says he basically gave him bad advice, said he had a 4-year, $70 million contract offer on the table in 2017, and that Paul advised him not to take it, saying he could get a better deal a year later. Noel ends up breaking his thumb that year, ends up signing a bunch of smaller contracts. Now, he did get a good deal this offseason, I think $27.7 million guaranteed. So it's not like we're not going to be crying for Nerlens Noel for his future, but just interesting. Basically saying he advised Noel basically to bet on himself, saying he could have a better chance of getting a contract in free agency, unrestricted free agency the next year. But 2017, a lot of money was flying around fast and furious at that point because of ballooning salary caps, things like that. So I just think it's interesting that he's suing him to try to get the money back, even though he ultimately was the one who, even though Rich Paul gave him the advice, Nerlens Noel is the one who took the advice, is he not? So kind of a frivolous lawsuit, I think. Sue everybody. The people that you handle and represent probably will be suing them too. Nerlens Noel suing his former agent, Rich Paul. Just found that to be amusing, maybe a little bit sad. Kind of goes to show the relationships that happen and what happens kind of behind the scenes. That'll do it today. Thanks for joining me on Daily Delivery. I think I'm going to have Ethan Finley from Minnesota United on the show. Thursday should be a good one there. Friday, probably talking to Chris Hine for some insights on new Timberwolves owner Mark Lowry. Thanks for joining me today. Download this podcast. Always subscribe to Star Tribune, startribune.com, and we'll catch you again on Thursday.